Right, welcome back to Afternoon Garage. So last time we removed the whole front suspension underneath the vehicle, kind of took it all apart, and this time what we're going to do is we're going to prepare all those suspension components and then get underneath this thing and clean up the chassis, put some rubberized undercoating on it, maybe some POR 15 rust preventative kind of thing, and then we're also going to be painting all those chassis parts. Now, one thing to remember about painting these chassis parts, what I'm going to show you is something I've done over, I don't know, maybe 20-25 years of actually operating the tools that I have. And I'm going to be operating a grinder with one of these things on it without a guard. Now, I'm going to tell you right now that if that thing slips and kind of gets wrapped up in your clothing or something like that, man, it's going to hurt. So I don't want to come on here and say, don't do as I show you, but just be careful. You want to wear safety glasses. What happens here is that these little pieces of wire will actually break off, and they'll actually be able to penetrate your skin, and you'll have a piece of wire sticking out of your skin, and you pull it and it starts bleeding, and it gets pretty ugly. So you might want to wear a welder's canvas or something like that, to protect yourself. But just remember that what you're about ready to see is something that I've been doing for years and years and years, and I have a lot of practice. Well, stripping rust and paint isn't the most exciting thing in the world, but I'm going to do my best to kind of keep it engaging, and then what I'll do is I'll just pick maybe the control arm and then the strut and pick a few different parts and kind of refinish those so you can get an idea of my painting technique. Everything's going to be sped up to like a +3, so you have to kind of factor that in, but it kind of gives you an idea on kind of what you need to do as far as getting them as clean as possible for preparation for paint. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by cutting the tow hooks off the front. I know it had some tow hooks on there and they sat kind of low, and I really don't want them on there. I see most cars, they end up cutting them off and grinding them flat, making them so they were never there. What happens is they kind of get ground on the bottom. In the case of mine, one actually just completely came apart. So we'll be cutting those off first. And of course we're going to do a bunch of parts washing, of course grinding off a lot of the rust in the paint with one of these guys here. I'm anxious to get started, get these parts painted. Alright, got most of the rust and paint stripped from all these parts here. Wire wheel looks pretty good. You kind of have to use a combination of different wheels you see there. You know, something chucked up in the drill and well, maybe some in the die grinder. I think I'm going to leave a lot of these parts alone, like maybe that one there, that aluminum crossbeam there. And then, of course, the torsion bars. I really don't want to do anything with those. You don't want to, you know, say strip the paint off them or do anything like that. Just kind of leave them alone, maybe put a light coating of grease on them before you install it. But overall, these look pretty good. There are some parts in here and little crevices that you really can't get to. Therefore, we'll be using, you know, something like this, little Dremel with a wire on the top of it. Yeah, you can kind of get down in some of these parts like in here and take some more of that rust off and maybe a little bit of paint with it too. That would be good. And then those spots we can't get to, we'll use a product like this called Rust Mort. That's good for stuff like this where you have, you know, it's going to be hard to get inside of this. This dust boot here, you know, with the strut, and so you can brush some of that on inside of there, and it'll neutralize it pretty good. But overall, I'm about an hour or two out from hanging these parts and painting them with epoxy.
20 minutes later. Twenty minutes later.
I let these parts dry for a couple days, and you can see they look really good. That's the right kind of sheen, kind of a satin look. Turned out really good. Well, now it looks pretty good under here. Not too much rust, just a bunch of overspray. You can see overspray in here, and yeah, it's actually pretty good. I'm really surprised. The gas tank looks like it's just a little brown, but yeah, there's a little bit of surface rust there. And I think I'll just put Porsche 15 on it. But back here is where it gets kind of interesting, because you can see that this is kind of a green tint. This is all gray primer from the factory, and I really think I'm just gonna leave it just like this. Everything looks really cleaned up well in here. So I think what I'm gonna do is to see a little tinge of green there, but I think I'm gonna leave this the original color. I don't think you're gonna see it anyway because it's covered by that closing panel. Let's take a look in the fenders and see what they look like. Okay, here's what the fender looks like. You can see that's the original color green right there. Then inside of there you have original primer gray. But overall, I think this cleaned up pretty good. Then I'm gonna put rubberized undercoating on here. And this is the other side. Pretty much same thing happening over here. Maybe pour surface prep behind the strut there. But overall, cleaned up pretty well. Pretty good to me. You know what? Looks pretty good over here too. Put some Porsche 15 on the rest of this stuff. Should be good to go. All right, round one of painting. These look pretty good. And all these parts. Hey, those parts hanging up look pretty good, huh? Pretty happy with that. That satin paint I use is going to be good for UV and that kind of thing, even though it's really not going to see any light underneath here. But that's going to last for a long time. I'm looking forward to getting this front end back together. If you haven't already, please subscribe. More content to come.